Habari Gani, y'all. It's Chanda Branch. I am the modern Black mommy. I'm the mommy caster, the founder, and the cultural creative behind this new brand where I energize Black women in every phase of motherhood around their parenting choices, their challenges, and experiences so that we can redefine the task of raising Black children who are safe, happy, healthy, and whole. That's my mission. And just by being with us this evening, you are helping to contribute to that success. You're playing a magnificent role in it. Thank you so much for being here. You are watching Kwanzaa, a modern celebration for 2020. Again, I want to welcome you and tell you that we are glad that you are joining us for night 4 of our celebration. Can you believe that? We've been here 4 times already and just enjoying and celebrating this holiday with each other. I really hope that this live stream series will inspire you to learn about and to institute new traditions in your home um, for one of the holidays that's specifically developed for Black people with us in mind. That's significant. And I think that you will find in listening to these live streams and watching and viewing along with us that that is absolutely the truth. While this holiday is officially celebrated for 7 days each year, its principles lay out a way of life that can be applied and practiced every single day of the year. So I have gathered an amazing group of folks to help us with this celebration. Um, Kwanzaa this year is proving to be more special and more significant than ever before for me and for my family. And we are learning to apply these principles in a modern context. We're learning to apply them in a way that really is going to help us move forward beyond 2020 and into a day where Black folks are not experiencing the same struggles that we have historically been facing. So, to recap, on night 1, we had Edith Berry, who is a minister and performer, poet, artist, dancer. She's amazing. And we had Corey Branch, who is the city councilman for District C here in Raleigh, North Carolina. He also had a 3-year stint as mayor pro tem. He also happens to be my husband. So that was a big deal for me on night 1 to begin the celebration with folks who are family and who I consider family. We had a gorgeous libation ceremony. It was very, very moving. And we really enjoyed that. It really set the tone and kicked us off in a really great way. Then on night 2, we had Karen Arrington, who is the NAACP Image Award winning author, a Goodwill ambassador to the Sierra Leone, and the founder of the Miss Black USA pageant. She joined us to talk about Kujichagulia, or self-determination. Then in night 3, y'all, night 3 was fire. Last night, the energy was off the charts. We tackled Ujamaa, or collective work and responsibility, with Kendall Harris, who is an alpha man and director of the Clarence E. Lightner Y Achievers program, and Kina Day, who is the savvy urban educator. She's also a poet, author, and community education advocate. That conversation, it really just dug down in my spirit, y'all. I had a great time last night. But what you need to know is that tonight promises to be just as hot. The lineup just keeps getting better and better for each night. I have an incredible announcement to give you guys at the end of tonight's broadcast. So stay tuned. Make sure you stay with us. And I'll give you a peek into that. But for right now, let's dig into Kwanzaa, right? Each night, I'm taking a moment just to overview for friends who might be joining us for the first time and for those of us who need a refresher because, as an educator, I know that repetition works. So I want to let everybody know again what Kwanzaa is and why it's so significant. So here are the basics. Kwanzaa was founded in 1966 by Dr. Malana Karenga as a way to bring the Black community together after the particularly tumultuous period of the civil rights movement. He understood that African Americans needed to celebrate family, community, and culture through the lens of a traditionally African principles and traditionally African lifestyles. So he understood that and put this holiday together in a very strategic, very intentional manner. Things to remember. The holiday is celebrated in sevens. There are 7 days. There are 7 candles that we light. There are 7 principles that we learn about and commit to following. It's not a religious holiday. So, no matter your religion, you are welcome here. It doesn't lean to one faith or the other. All of those are lifted up and joined. It's more about the principles and the ways of living than it is any particular doctrine. And then also remember that it was created by and for those of the African diaspora. That means Black folks wherever they are around the world. And while that is true, we are in a modern celebration, and I want to make it absolutely clear that everyone is welcome. We want all of our BIPOC family here. We want all of our non-white family here. We want our allies to join in this celebration because that's the way that they are going to learn. That's the way that they are going to come to a better understanding of who we are and why we function the way we do. They're going to come to a better understanding about how to support us as true allies and as effective allies. And I think that the practice of effective allyship is going to move us into a whole new mindset as we go further into 2020, wrap this year up. And as we move into 2021 and the years beyond, I think that effective allyship is one of the things that we are going to have to focus on and embrace. So, why Kwanzaa? Why now? 2020 is more than 50 years outside the founding of this holiday, and yet Black folks seem to be facing a lot of the same situations and circumstances that we were when the holiday was founded. And it's time to change that. We've got to grapple with some of the things that have affected us over the years, and we've got to begin to heal from that. What I found was that Kwanzaa and the principles of Kwanzaa were the things that really kept popping up in my research. Well, my research turned into writing, and my writing turned into a book. So I have written a book entitled Your Guide to a Modern Kwanzaa Celebration. And you can get it at tinyurl.com/Kwanzaa Mommy. But I think what I need everybody to understand about the book is that it's not a book just for moms. It is a book for the family, right? I know that many times mothers are the ones who are in charge of the festivities and the celebrations that happen. And this was a way for me to find a touch point within the homes of Black folks everywhere and to say that these are some things that I've read and researched and I'm going to be applying with regard to my household and my family. And I wanted to give you access to the same. So the book contains more than just information. Okay, there's also journaling and reflection opportunities. There are resources there. You've got a lot of space where you can sit with these things and plan out the journey for your family. So it's more than just chapter on chapter on chapter on chapter. It is very interactive, and I think that you're going to enjoy that. So again, you can get your copy at tinyurl.com/Kwanzaa Mommy, right? So anybody who knows me knows that just writing the book, that wasn't enough. I also know that I have tremendous people in my life and in my world who walk these principles out, who live them on a daily basis, who have good information to share with not just me, but with the world and with the Black community at large. And so I set out with the help of my friend Lauren at RDU On Stage, who is our streaming sponsor. I set out to gather these folks together in a series of live streams. So that's what you're watching. And each night, the experts who have come on and had discussion with me have been tremendous. They have really shared from the heart. They've spoken from their expertise and experience. And tonight promises to be more of that. So I want to welcome my guest, Isaac B. Horton IV. Y'all, Isaac Horton is a tremendous gentleman. Let me tell you a little bit about him, okay? Isaac is an 8th generation native of the city of Oaks, okay? That means Raleigh, North Carolina, for my friends who are abroad and living elsewhere, okay? He is specifically a descendant of the Quarry Hill area. And as the son of one of the world's foremost experts in intellectual property, Isaac developed his thirst for entrepreneurship at a young age. He launched his first business at the age of 8 in lawn care and landscaping. So after graduating from UNCG, Isaac worked in corporate America for 3 quarters while doing extensive due diligence and research in small business opportunities in the state of North Carolina. He's more recently formed the Horton Enterprise Incorporated, and that's a holding company, and has been starting one of his targeted businesses every 18 months, which is ushering him into the business community as a serial entrepreneur. The consulting arm of Horton Enterprises is based in his understanding that business is not just business, it's also relationships and having ethical relationships as well. So Isaac leads the small businesses down a path of success, whether one wants to start or sell or buy a business. And he believes that mankind has never been more capable, and there exist opportunities for thousands of new inventions and innovations, which is the spirit behind Horton Enterprises. I love his slogan, "The future is bright." Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Isaac Horton. It's so good to see you, Isaac.
So good to be here. Thank you very much. Am I
Awesome.
able to be
So,
heard? Are you able to hear me
oh, yeah,
well?
we've got you loud and strong.
Okay, great.
All right. So I'm going to invite Isaac and everyone to join me in the candle lighting ceremony tonight. So we're going to learn much more about Isaac as we lift up the principle for the night, which is Ujamaa, cooperative economics. So this is the fourth night of our candle lighting. Again, remember I told you that there's a very specific and intentional way that Dr. Karenga developed this holiday and the ceremonies that go along with it. So on the first night, we light the center black candle. And if you guys will remember, my Kanara is both economical and family friendly. Okay, if you had a hard time finding a Kanara and the right colored tapers and all of that jazz, improvise. Okay, the spirit of this is what you're after. On the next night, we light the first red candle, which is the outermost. I also have a 2-year-old in my home, and so these click on, click off LED lights are a safe option. So, again, if you have a family, you've got to think about all of these things. Okay, on the third night, we light our outermost green candle. And then on night 4, we go back to the red side and we light the center red candle. So here we go, friends. Habari gani? Ujamaa. Ujamaa means cooperative economics. Ujamaa means to build and maintain our own stores, shops, and other businesses, and to profit from them together. So you can tell from Mr. Horton's bio that he is indeed the right person to speak with us tonight about cooperative economics, right? So let's back up a little bit, Isaac. I want you to tell me about this first business. As an 8-year-old, where did you get the spunk, the chutzpah, and whatever else you want to call it, or more importantly, the resources to be able to start a business?
Well, first, let me just tell you, I'm so happy that you were taking the time and investing the energy in our community to invest in children and invest in mothers, because that is such an important endeavor. It started in my interaction with my mother. Um, Oftentimes in the African American community, we have the posture with children to exclude them from understanding the cost of things. And I
Yeah,
call it cost consciousness, right? Um, Whenever a young kid, your 5-year-old or your 6-year-old says, how much does this cost, mommy? You say, look, boy, don't worry about that. Just know that your mama's getting it. Okay. Mind your business. Stay. This is a grown folk business.
right.
children don't ask stuff like that, right? But my mother really always answered my questions. When I was curious, she always answered my questions. And so I was naturally curious about how much things cost when I was a child. If we went to the grocery store and, she bought groceries, I wanted to know how much did that grocery bill cost? How much was that box of mac and cheese? How much was that loaf of bread? And my mother she would tell me. And so as a young child, I grew up understanding what things cost in my environment. Everything around me had a price tag. And because I understood how much things cost, I could understand and appreciate the value of things. The motivation from starting my first business came, every Friday I would get a $5 allowance, and $5 came from washing dishes, vacuuming, mowing the lawn, all the things that you're supposed to do as a child. Well, I was born in the '80s. That's what children did then, right?
Come through,
We,
80s. All
you know,
right, 80s
we
baby.
that's right, '80s babies. We were a part of the house. We did chores. That was our job. And my mother would bless me with my contribution. She would give me $5 every Friday, and I was really into action figures and superheroes, and I loved X-Men. I loved X-Men. And so there was on New Bern Avenue, like I said, I'm an eighth generation Raleighite, so I've lived in Raleigh my whole life. On New Bern Avenue, at the intersection of New Hope and New Bern Avenue, there was a Kmart there.
Uh-huh.
Um, and that Kmart, I like to go there and I would like to, purchase toys. And there was this action figure that I wanted. It was a special edition and it cost $20. So I had saved up my money for every Friday for a whole month, and I had $20. And I went to purchase that action figure. My mom took me there when she got off work after school. I got back home from after school care. She picked me up. We went straight to Kmart, and I went there, and the action figure was $20 a mark. And I didn't quite understand sales tax.
Oh,
So it was time for me to ring out and get that toy, and it came out to, back then I think sales tax was like $5.50 or something like that for every 5 cents for every dollar you got, and it was over $20. And my
yep.
mom said, "Well, no, I'm not going to give you the money. You have to work another week, and you have to
Ooh,
come back, and you have to, purchase the action figure." And I looked, I remember I think I was a 6-year old thinking to myself, "Gosh, a whole month, and I still couldn't
yeah,
get what I wanted of doing stuff. I need to make more of this money stuff, as a
yeah,
as a
yeah.
kindergartner." And that's what ignited my passion for, wanting to get money, because I never wanted to be in a situation where there was something that I wanted that I wasn't empowered financially to be able to achieve that thing. And as I got older, I started to understand that it was important for people in our community to have more than enough, not from a position of greed, but
Right.
from a position of benevolence. That at some point in your life, that God was going to call upon you to help somebody else, and you would have to have more than enough to be able to help someone else.
There are a couple of things that I have to pop in and retouch because they were so good. You said your mom respected you enough as a child not to keep things from you. She shared with you what things cost and allowed you into what grown up in the South we call grown folks business,
That's right.
right? She allowed that in, and you benefited from it. You also benefited from that moment where she said, "No, I'm not going to bail you out. You got to
Right.
keep working to get what you want." And I think that as a mom, a lot of times, I know it's my instinct. You don't want your child to want for anything. You want to pop in and save the day if that's what it takes. But she actually gave you a gift in that moment in helping you work through, okay, wait a minute. So that little bit that I got still wasn't enough to cover what I wanted. She gave you a gift in that moment. And I think that's something that we can take away. And then finally, what you said about having more than enough so that you can share it. Blessed to be a blessing is what some of the mega churches like to phrase it as. But I just think that is so powerful. Being able to not just be secure. Security meets your needs and the needs of your household, but benevolence, that's incredible. I love that thought.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. So you started your business. You talked a little bit about where your entrepreneurial spirit comes from. What drove you and how did that develop and change over time? Because I know that, you didn't just start that one business and be satisfied that you got your action figure and you're like, okay, I'm out of the game. But that created a mindset for you that set a trajectory. So tell me a little bit more about the next couple of steps in your entrepreneurial life.
Well, so I started making money, right? I was a kid knocking on your door on a Saturday morning at 9 a.m., waking your parents up, right? Hitting your door, hitting your front door and saying, your mom coming down to her road, pissed off that some, kid had, knocked on the door at 9 a.m. after a long work week, being able to sleep in. And I'd say, hey, sir, hey, ma'am, I noticed that your grass is a little high. I got my lawnmower out here, for $5. This is back in, the early 90s, right? So $5 was a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I thought to myself, if I was able to make $5 doing my chores and I had to do a list of, 12 to 15 things to get that $5, if I could take one activity on my list and get $5 just for that, right? So I started moving around different pieces of what it means to be a business person. And I went from, getting my neighbor's lawn to the neighbor beside them, to my street, to, buying multiple lawnmowers and having my friends mow a lawn, and I increased the price to $10 and I take 5 and give them 5. They were my lawnmowers, and I had 68, lawns in the neighborhood.
Yikes.
When I was in middle school, I went into cleaning offices.
Okay.
So me and my same group of friends, right? My uncle is a successful doctor, Dr. Alan Mask, and he was on
I love Dr.
WRAL.
Mask.
And he had Raleigh Urgent Care on New Bern Avenue. He knew a network of doctors, and so who wouldn't want to let support kids that wanted to come in and clean up the medical offices and take the trash out and tidy stuff up and rake the leaves and stuff like that to maintain the medical office. And so me and that same group of friends, we were servicing these medical practices and getting a couple of $100. So now I went from my average transaction being $10 to my average transaction being a couple of $100, right? And that was significant for me. And then I transitioned into event throwing in high school. I threw our after prom party. I threw, different things that I recognized people wanted to attend. To my largest transaction when I was 17 years old, I rented out a big dome building at the fairgrounds, the Dorton Arena, and I threw a
Yeah.
party for Wake County and Durham County, and we had 2,500 students come, and I made about $40,000 one night, and that's when I was 17. And then things slowed down for me because I went to college.
Yeah.
And in college, there were lots of distractions, and I had to focus on my schoolwork full time. But when I was in high school, I was really able to breeze through school. And I went to a pretty challenging school. I went to Enloe, and that was when Enloe was
Okay.
number one, magnet school in the country, number 42nd school in the country overall. But college, I became an alpha. I learned a lot about relational intelligence and interacting with people. And when I graduated, I thought to myself, and I realized through studying economics in undergraduate school, that if I was going to be a person that was able to contribute to the world, the world contribution, that I'd have to be as close as I could to being in 100% control of my own. And
Yeah.
that's what solidified entrepreneurship for me as my path. It was very organic for me, right? Because my father was an entrepreneur. My uncle, like I said, Dr. Alan Mass was a doctor, but was also owned his own urgent care. He was an entrepreneur. So I had entrepreneurs in my family, and so it was very organic for me.
That's important. Another couple of things that you touched on, you didn't just try to mow all the lines in Raleigh on your own. You went and worked cooperatively with some other friends who you knew would need more than that $5 allowance from their parents. That cooperative mindset early on, working together and sharing fairly what we've earned. That's important. And I think that is the heart of tonight's principle. And, for you to have figured that out early on, what do you think it is that kind of gets in the way of us as adults in the Black community being able to pool our money and pool our resources and really work together in the way that it came so naturally and so easily to you as a child?
Well, I think that for me, it's very important. I think that oftentimes we're a little too hard on ourselves in terms of the African American community. I think that it's very important to put the African American community in a proper perspective.
Uh-huh.
Um, the African American community, as compared to the other communities in America, are babies. Right?
Hmm.
The African American community is a baby, right?
That's right. That's
Just
right.
a few years ago, we got the right to vote, right?
That's right.
So,
Hmm.
my father, not my great grandfather, but my father, Dr. Isaac B. Horton III, I'm Isaac the fourth. My father had to use the black only bathroom, right? Not my great grandfather, but my dad, right?
Hmm.
So, when we talk about economic liberty, that's something where there are African Americans alive still who were taxed money out of their paychecks,
Yeah.
FICA, right?
Yeah.
Where money
Hmm.
was being taken from their paychecks, but they weren't able to vote and make decisions about how that money was used,
Was
right?
spent. Yeah.
So
That's
when
right.
you're talking about the African American community and the principles that need to be inculcated inside of our psyche, the paradigms that shape how people make decisions economically, subconsciously, my generation, I'm the first generation in my family that's not under some form of legal discrimination, right?
That's right.
Where the
Hmm.
police or some type of authoritative body would show up and legally enforce discrimination on me. Like I said, my
Yep. That's
dad
right.
had to
Mhm.
use the black owned bathroom, right? So, so in terms of why it's so difficult for African Americans to seemingly flow into some of the same economic activities and habits, and to enter into certain cyclical circumstances that the other communities enter into. Number one, we're very young in
Yeah.
terms of a community, and then number two, then some people say, well, hey, well, my family is first generation from India. Okay, so we're pretty new here, but there's a big difference between a group of people that, number one, have been here for hundreds of years, right, which is most
That's right.
European American communities, and then foreign cultures or ethnicities that voluntarily decide to come here, right? And then there are all kinds of economic studies. Like I said, I'm a young economist. My undergraduate degree is in economics and African American studies. And there are some critical differences when a population of people get to make an active decision to come here
That's
in
right.
terms of their diet, their finances, their dedication to group economics, education, having a sense of nationalism in a foreign nation. So they have a community-based tribe-like structure, which has all
That's
kinds of
right.
incredible economic benefits
Benefits. Yep.
when you choose to come to a place.
And so much of what you are saying, I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch this episode myself and like type out the notes and make sure that everybody's catching everything. But so much of what you're saying is in alignment with the whole purpose of this principle. I think a recognition that we have not had the benefits of a sustained path or a linear path that some other cultural groups have had. These principles are meant to get us back to what was interrupted. This is what we did in Africa. This is the way that culturally we operated before slavery, before we were abducted from our homeland, brought to a country, a place against our will, forced into labor, and, then, as you said, into practices of Jim Crow and discrimination for generations. That this long has been the struggle. And we've had this much true liberty and equity and freedom. And we are finding that even that is not the case. We are still bumping our heads against a few things that absolutely are holdovers from slavery and from the way that we have been treated and persecuted here in this country. And so I love that you say we are too hard on ourselves and too hard on each other as Black people, because we have to give each other that space to grow and come to an understanding about these principles. And so again, I'm so glad that you have the expertise where right where it meets in the crossroads, the economics piece and the African American history piece, to be able to say this is what was and this is where we are, and here are some principles to help us move forward. That's incredible. What is it that every Black household can do in 2021 to make sure that they advance economically in some way, shape, or form? What's something that every Black household needs to look at, think about, or practice in 2021?
Well, um, I would say that establishing an economic base or a consciousness for the need for the development of an economic base, I think is one of the most important, most powerful things. You know, Malcolm X talked about the concept of Black nationalism,
Uh-huh.
which is such a powerful concept because when you look at all the other cultures in America or major ethnic groups, they are already structured in terms of a nationalistic perspective, whether or not you're talking about the Italians or you're talking about the Jewish community, you talk
Hmm.
about a more
The
overt community,
Mexicans.
the Hispanic community,
Hmm.
subsets inside of the Hispanic community, like the
That's,
Mexican
yep,
community.
yep. Just a
When you
snippet.
talk about the specifically Asian American communities, like for example, in major cities, they have a Chinatown, right? Where
Chinatown.
they say,
Yep.
hey, listen, you know, this is a part of town and it's for us. It's called Chinatown, right?
Yep.
Um, and
Little
so
Little Italy.
Little Italy, right? And so
Hmm.
you see these in the major metropolitan areas, and even in some of the sub-metropolitan top 25 cities. But a sense of Black nationalism is so important because you know the IMF reported that they were expecting in the early teens, they were expecting by 2019 the African American community would have about 1.9 trillion dollars of purchasing power,
Whew,
right? So
that's
you
a
know when you
T.
talk about
Trillion.
right, $1.9 trillion dollars of
Hmm.
purchasing power, right?
Hmm.
There are almost 40 million African Americans in the United States of America. So you're talking about a population of people that outnumbers the country of France, right? So there are more African Americans in the United States than there are people in the country of France, and there are people in Portugal, right?
That's right. That's right.
So when you look at African Americans not as a group of displaced refugees
Uh-huh.
that are
Uh-huh.
in a country, and we assume a nationalistic or nationalism based ideology, we begin to see the need to come together like all the other cultures naturally have set up because they voluntarily came here, right?
That's right.
Um, and so instilling that ideal in your child as a base level of understanding gives them the proper perspective. My dad told me when I was in middle school and I was in the advanced classes and I was given a hard time by some of the white students
Yep.
at my middle school. And being the only African American in this advanced science class or XYZ, you know, I had to learn how to navigate between certain inappropriate jokes or certain ways that I was being treated. And one day I had a really, a rough day in my biology class. And I came to my dad and he told me, son, you know, I want you to understand that you are not a minority. You know, and
Preach.
I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, you know, he said, you are not minority. There are a billion people in Africa. There are 2 billion, 2.7 billion people in Asia. There are a billion people in South America. The majority of the world is colored.
That's right.
Um,
Yep.
and it changed my whole perspective, not viewing myself as a minority, um, that really allowed me to understand that I was a part of something.
That's right.
And that nationalism element is so important. So when you talk about Black nationalism and you talk about the purchasing power or the economics of the African American community, $1.4 trillion by 2019, which is last year, would make us the 16th largest economy in the world, right? But the thing that's important to understand is that if we don't set up a structure of group economics, then our purchasing power is wasted. Let me give you a practical example, right?
Please
Um,
do.
any country that produces um, nothing but spends, we call that import in economics, we call that importing and exporting. Any
That's right.
country that 90 imports 99% of its goods and exports 1% has what's called a trade deficit. And any country that has a trade deficit exhibits some very common characteristics in terms of health and wellness, in terms of asset procurement,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of income, in terms of education,
Mm-hmm.
all the way from health care quality to education. And that's what you see in our country now is that the African American community has a trade deficit. We
Yep.
have $1.4 trillion of purchasing power, right? But we don't produce anything. So all of the money that we spend it in other people's community. Let me give you the practical
Uh-huh.
example. For example, when you go and you purchase your hair care products, when I go and purchase my hair care products, the store in our community on New Bern Avenue, which I live
Uh-huh.
right in Chavis Heights,
Yep.
down the North Street, downtown in District 3, in District C, right, is that we go to the hair care place on New Bern Avenue in our community, but it's owned by the Koreans, right?
That's right.
The
Yep.
dry cleaners in the African American community is owned by the Chinese. The convenience store is owned by the Arab communities, right?
That's
The
right.
banks are run by the Jewish community. The construction companies are run by the Italians. The bars and nightlife entertainment are run by the Irish, right? And so when we go out to spend our money, we may give our money, we give our money to um, the Black Barber, right? Or the Black Beautician,
Yep.
but after that, we don't own our grocery store. So our food, which is the largest expense in the African American community budget, is food. It goes to the big box corporate America, and all those individual vendors go someplace else, right? And so
That's right.
in the average um, uh, Asian American community, when you earn $1 from your paycheck, it stays in the Asian community for 30 days. It stays in the average European Jewish community for 27 days. It stays
Uh-huh.
in the average European American community, people who are of Irish or Italian or Polish or European descent. It stays in their community for about 14 to 15 days. And the African American community, that dollar stays in our community for 6 hours, right?
Not a full day. Not even a
Not
full
even a
day.
full day, right? And so that has incredible implications
It
about
does.
our ability to be able to thrive. And so this phenomenon that I spoke on is something that every single Black child needs to hear at a young, to tie it back into your original question. That is the economic story, the fairy tale, the bed night, the midnight, the bedtime story that we need to be putting in Black children's ears at a young age to understand and get a sober perspective about where we really are and what the most important and drastic things that we have to consider, having the responsibility of being the first generation in my family that's not under some form of legal discrimination. It's important for me to sacrifice and to prioritize keeping my dollars circulating within our community so that my grandchildren and my grandchildren's children have somewhat of a close of a fighting chance to having some type of economic stability in an ever evolving, rapidly growing global world now.
That's right. You talked about the Black Barber and the Black Beautician. And one thing that I realize and recognize is it doesn't stay long with them. A lot of people feel really good about, well, my barber's black, my hairdresser is black, or my nail tech is black. She can't buy her supplies from a black source. She is paying rent to someone who does not look like her. So her ability to recirculate that same dollar that you just gave her is limited because we don't own the buildings. It's limited because we don't manufacture the products that she needs to do your hair. We don't manufacture the tools that the barber is cutting your hair with. So we've got to get beyond that. Well, I eat at Oak City Fish and Chips all the time, and I do, because it's right next door to where I work, and I cannot stay out of there. They know me. Um, but yes, all of that is true, but we need to buy that strip center
That's right.
so that we can neighbor and partner with other Black businesses and get some more people in there the opportunity to recirculate that Black dollar. That's the only way to keep it circulating within our systems. That's the only way to keep it rolling right there. So that's my next question for you, Isaac. How is how do we support those folks who want to establish these other Black businesses that we need? Because we're going to need more than barbers and hairdressers and restaurants. We're going to need more than that in our community. So how do we set out to make sure that we have everything we need cradle to grave, which is, we'll get back to that too. We want to talk about Black Wall Street and the
Okay.
history there. But how do we make sure that we have everything we need cradle to grave coming out of the Black community so that we can circulate that dollar right there inside our Africa town, as Miss Berry has in the chat?
Right. So, I've thought long and hard about this
Uh-oh.
for years. And, I believe that fear is really, most people that talk about things like this, it's
Mhm.
really convenient to live in the theory of something. It's another
Ah,
thing to see it tested and stand. And any time in history, and history tells a lot. Um, and being a student of history is so important because it allows you to learn from the mistakes of others. Um, how do we make sure that we have what we need? How we make sure that the African American has what we need is to recognize two things. The first thing is that um, we need to establish what is called buying clubs. Okay.
ah, okay.
When you understand, when you look back at African American history, we have had examples of great success. Um, Tulsa, you see
Uh-huh.
Eastern North Carolina in Wilmington, right? And a lot of times these thriving communities have been bombed or literally destroyed through overt racism. But take, for example, the bus boycotts that took place during civil rights. It wasn't because the boycotting of the bus, solidarity of people not riding the bus, uh, demonstrated that African Americans were being mistreated. It was because the bus boycotts that African Americans were 75% of the customers of the bus. We represented the largest buying club of
That's
tickets
right.
from the bus. And because we boycotted it, the bus system, the bus companies were no longer receiving the revenue to be able to sustain their operations. It wasn't because, the display of Black people walking instead of riding the bus that was so shocking, right? While then in the 50s and 60s, the African American community was a geographical place, right? Where
Uh-huh.
we had our own shops, right? You went to Mrs. Lewis's sweet potato garden and you bought your sweet potatoes, right? You
Yeah,
went to the Black dentist because you couldn't go to the white dentist, right?
that's correct.
My
That's
dad was
correct.
born on Shaw's campus, literally born on Shaw's campus. A lot of people didn't know that Shaw actually, even in fact, had the first Black medical school in the country right here in Raleigh, North Carolina. But my dad was born on Shaw's campus because they weren't accepting Black babies in the hospital here, right?
That's right.
So you went to the black dentist, you went to the black pharmacist, right? There's a black pharmacy on Hargett Street here still. When that whole area of downtown Raleigh was the black marketplace, right?
That's right.
Um,
That's right.
Dr. C. Haywood, which is across the street from the black pharmacy on Hargett Street now, which was the black dentist, right? That was my great, 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 uncle, right? And so, while the African American community was refined to a geographical location in those areas because of the social discrimination. They only let black people live in a certain part of town, right? You couldn't buy a
Mhm.
house in the white neighborhood, right?
Mhm.
So they had us in one area, and now you see that the black community is dispersed throughout a municipality, right? Where you may have an area of town, even Southeast Raleigh, that people think is, the black side of town, but 47% of Southeast Raleigh is Caucasian American, is
Thank you.
white.
Hmm.
And then you mix in all the other cultures around there. Southeast Raleigh is not the black side of town, right?
No,
The
no.
African American community is dispersed throughout a municipality now in all the major cities. But what remained consistent was our clubs, right?
Yeah.
The Alphas, the AKAs, the NAACP, the Jack and Jills. While our community was geographically dispersed in terms of where you lived, our social clubs have remained intact, and they represent significant buying power in
That's
order
right.
for us to be right. And so I wanted to read this. It's an economic article, scholarly article that I wrote, and it had some very interesting statistics. I wanted to read this one little snippet. Economists say that the Great Recession lasted from 2007 to 2009, according to an analysis of Federal Reserve data by the Economic Policy Institute, or the EPI. In
Hmm.
2004, the median net worth of white households was $134,000. Okay, that's the median net worth of white households, $134,000, compared with $13,000 for black households. $134,000 compared to 13,000, right? So we're talking about 10 times the amount of wealth, right? So then by 2009, the median net worth for white households had fallen because of the recession
Hmm.
24% to 97,000. The average, the median, not the average, but the median white household had almost
Median.
100
Right.
grand, right? While the net worth of African Americans had fallen to $2,170. So 100,000 versus 2,000, right? So the director of the EPI, Mr. Austin, the director of the EPI's program on race, ethnicity, and economy, described the current wealth gap this way. In 2009, for every dollar of wealth the average white household had, black households only had 2 cents, right?
Bring it
So
home.
that has incredible implications on our ability to provide for our children,
Hmm.
to explore opportunities, to for our wealth position to accelerate or increase, right? And so the only way, because the other communities have such an exuberant amount of purchasing power as
Uh-huh.
compared to us, the only way that we'll be able to bring home your question, the only way that we'll be able to have black businesses and the black community thrive financially from A to Z is group buying, right?
That's
Maybe
it.
you can't purchase that block at the corner of Sunnybrook and Rock Quarry Road, which I've had my eye on those 4 acres, right? But maybe I can come together with 9 other black families, right? And we can group buy that
Hmm.
those 5 acres, right? That $2 million that they want, maybe that split across 10 households, right? Maybe that neighborhood that we need to build, we want to build 200 homes. Maybe that is there's 70,000 members of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, right? Maybe Alpha Phi Alpha comes in, and all the members of the 70,000 members all give $100, right? Or $50, and we group purchase. So group buying is the way for us to level the playing field. And that's often why you've seen a lot of thought leaders in the African American community, from Dr. King, from Malcolm X, to so many other leaders, talk about the importance of us working together. Is the only way that we're going to be able to close the wealth gap is through group economics.
That's the truth. And the numbers are stunning when you hear them out loud. But when you look around, you can see it. When you look around, you're going, well, yeah, no, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. And the idea of group buying came up last night when we talked about collective work, and responsibility. And I think that you have just expanded what one of your fraternity brothers said last night. Kendall Harris said, we, as a fraternity, or as fraternities and sororities and some of the other organizations you mentioned, Jack and Jill, and some other groups, we take our conventions to these big cities, and we land in a hotel, and we rent the convention center, and we pay all of this money to these outside entities, rather than coming together and purchasing a plot of land and building a facility that we can all come to and return to, and we can all call home. And so, that thought has transitioned into tonight's conversation. And I think that that is something for us to keep our eyes on and keep our sights on. But I also wanted to ask you about co-ops specifically. How do we engage, and how do we start co-ops, and how do we sustain them? What's a good, like a starting marker?
Well, what I say is that clarity of vision keeps
Mm-hmm.
you increasingly accelerating towards your goal.
Mm-hmm.
How to start a cooperative where many of us come together and form the foundation of some type of group economics based platform, which is essentially the essence of a cooperative.
That's right.
Um, I think the first thing is to not overwhelm ourselves with something that is a level 5 or a level 6 problem when we need to address level 1s.
That's right.
So not starting with, so beginning with the end in mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
Choosing something that is practical. The first cooperative that I would start would be based around food, right? So,
Groceries. Yep.
yeah. So, the African American community spends a disproportionate amount of its income on food as compared to the other communities. For us, we spend almost twice as much on food. Number one, because it has to do with the difference in income. So, of course, if you make $100,000 versus you make $25,000, if you spend $10,000 a year on food for your entire family, that represents 50% of your income versus 10% if somebody makes 100,000, right?
Correct.
So, picking identifying the most practical uh, areas that we need cooperation in, and that's food. Food security is a big problem in America for all the communities, and we're going to start to see that pop up in discussion across the. It's already going on across the world, but now it's here in America, and food security is defined by number one, is food accessible, and number two, is it poisoned? And
Mm-hmm.
so, but people right now are just focused on whether or not they can have access to food. And so, starting cooperative around that means, being the us starting to get the whole dollar, right?
Yeah.
In any
Yeah.
cooperative that you start, the purpose of a cooperative is to control what's called your capital stack, right? So, for example, in food, right, you have a farmer, you have a distributor, and then you have a retailer. the farmer gets 7 cents on for every dollar that's spent, so they're not making very much money off the fruits and vegetables that you buy. The retailer gets about 23 cents, and then the distributor, they're getting about 70
Mhm.
percent, right? And so the purpose of a cooperative would be to place people in our community that are the farmer, the retailer, and the distributor, so that we benefit from the whole dollar of the money that you spend. So any
That's right.
cooperative that you start in any area, you want to make sure that, like you put it before, how can we make sure that we're getting taken care of from A to Z? That's the whole purpose of a cooperative, and how to establish that is by setting up all the areas that revenue is received, setting up the infrastructure for that revenue to be entered into our community through providing that business or service inside of that field or industry.
So is anybody doing that research, doing that work, or organizing that effort here in Raleigh? Or is there a national model that you're aware of that we can look to? Has somebody already hacked this and all we need to do is download the plan? I mean, where's that information living?
Well, my organization, we've been working on that type of information for the past 3 or 4 years, kind of
Okay.
in the background, and we have a few things that we're about to launch in 2021. But it's analogous to a an Outback versus an Oak City Fish and Chips, right? We have small examples of African American communities doing these things? Is there a manifesto? Is there a clarion source for we have small examples of it, but really there's an incredible opportunity for large amounts of leadership growth in
Uh-huh.
this area, in terms of thought leadership, in terms of us having the conversations around what that looks like economically. In every area, it's a blue ocean opportunity in terms of the African American community and group economics. Like I said, we're a baby, and so as we start to stand up and start to walk and waddle around and evolve into running and sprinting, right? How we get from crawling to sprinting, will require there being some type of large, concerted, strategic effort in doing that.
I love that. So there is space. You heard him say it. There is space for growth in that thought leadership area. And I want to give you a moment to talk about the space for growth that you're encountering right now. Oak City Fish and Chips, you've heard us mention it a couple of times. My brother Isaac started that as a food truck. He did his due diligence, he did his work and his research, he developed his own recipes, he got into the market with a food truck. Tell us where you are headed next, or Isaac.
So with Oak City Fish and Chips, we started off like you said, Mrs. Branch, with one food truck that we bought. My partner and I bought for $13,000 out of Durham County, and we turned that $13,000 into $1 million company. And when we first started, the average customer gave us $7.21. Our second milestone was our average customer giving us $14.50, to our average transaction being $23.50. And so, as an entrepreneur, I have been meditating on the past year and a half on what the future looks like for Oak City. We have a very simple, easy to execute model. And while Oak City is ripe for expanding, during COVID, we did better than ever before. While a lot of restaurants were stuck, not able to get people to come to them, because we have a bipartisan type a business model in terms of food trucks and brick and mortar restaurants. We were able to take our
Uh-huh.
menu to people, which proved that our business model was COVID proof or crisis proof. We work well in crisis, natural disasters. Our food trucks go out and serve first responders, and whether it be through disaster relief contracts, government contracts. And so for us, while I could continue to open up individual Oak Cities, right now, after the new year, we're going to be announcing we're about 95% of the way through negotiating with Crabtree Mall. So we'll be potentially opening up the highest projecting Oak City in the area, which will be Crabtree Mall. We'll probably do about $2 to $2.5 million at that location. And while I could own each individual location, it's time for me to transition to totally wearing the CEO hat of the company and going national with the brand. Our average customer gave, like I said, gives us $23.50, and now I'm going to have to share the business in order for it to grow to where it can go and be a seller of franchises versus being a seller of food of seafood, and let other people who want to make a few $1,000,000 a year own an Oak City, while I open up over the next 5 years. We're planning on opening about 120 Oak Cities across America, whether those be food truck franchises or Class A prominently placed Oak Cities in large venues like malls or airports like RDU or Charlotte Douglas International or Reagan, places that we're in communication with now for opening up brick and mortar locations. So whether it's opening up in Austin, or opening up in Atlanta, and opening up 4 food trucks in these metropolitan areas where they have 2 million people, 2 to 10 million people in a 150-mile radius, we're going to be taking Oak City across the country, and not just have it here in Raleigh. So we'll start. We're days away from having our federal disclosure documents finished, and we'll be announcing one of the that Oak City will be joining a very short list of Black-owned national franchises in the food and beverage industry.
Is that not incredible? I mean, from mowing lawns for $5 to being the CEO of a franchise national corporation, that is a huge leap. And it has not taken you 60 years to do it. It has not taken you 30 years to do it. You've crunched a phenomenal amount of work into a really short time period. And it's been through strategy and through education. We're so proud of you, and we're so proud that we have you as an example to lift up for the next generation, but also for folks within our own generation. It's not too late for us to start. It's not too late for the conversation to trickle into our ear even on tonight, and to start thinking about that business that you want to start, that business that you want to own, to start thinking about how you want to get together with a couple of girlfriends and go in and purchase something big. It's not too late to do that. Very often we feel like, well, if we didn't do it right out of college, or if we didn't do it here, or we place a timeline on things that is not realistic. So just knowing and understanding that it has been done, I think, is a huge step in helping us to do more. So I want to thank my special guest tonight, Isaac Horton. You are a tremendous light in the community. He's a business mind, but he also has a heart for the people. And I want to thank him for all of the work that he does that people don't know about, that he didn't talk about tonight, and he didn't lift up. He does a tremendous amount for the community, and we are grateful to have him. I want to encourage everybody to come back tomorrow night at 7:30. One of our guests is lurking in the chat. Tomorrow night, we are going to have the principle of NIA, or purpose, lifted up with Alexis Rome, none other than. She is phenomenal. But this just in, ladies and gentlemen, I made a phone call today, and it is locked. It is signed, sealed, delivered, and secured. The president, the international president of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, is going to be joining us tomorrow night. Dr. Everett B. Ward is going to be in the house. I cannot think of a better person, a better group. That panel is going to be absolutely on fire. Do not miss tomorrow night. Set your timers, set your alarm clocks, put a reminder in your Google, do whatever you need to do. Find the links, lock it down. Be here tomorrow night at 7:30. We are going to have a phenomenal time, just as we have had in the last 4 nights of programming. Again, I want to thank our special guest. I'm going to encourage y'all to come back tomorrow night. I want to thank RDU on stage for believing in me, for believing in this program. And I want to encourage you to check the links that are popping up on the screen, and they are also in the chat. That's where you can find your copy of Your Guide to a Modern Kwanzaa Celebration. That's where you can find the program guide that lists all of our guests and a little bit about them and how to contact them if you want to reach out. It's where you can find information about Kwanzaa itself. All the details are laid out for you because we want you guys to engage with us and stay on board with us. All right, friends, we will see you tomorrow night. Hariza Kwanzaa. May your Kwanzaa be blessed. Good night, everybody.